Good morning, everybody from upstate New York. We're on the road this week, but not off the job. It is such a pleasure to have John Sullivan back with us today to talk about how his campaign is going, where we are, and of course, what's at stake when we're thinking about protecting the rule of law in this election. A lot to discuss, a lot to cover, so we're going to get right into it. But as always, for those who are tuning in for the first time, watching our recordings, hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a husband, father of three, a Bedford resident, and resident of New York 17, which is Lower Hudson Valley in New York State. I'm a lifelong Democrat, a state health policy expert, a good governance advocate, and to mix it up this week, I'm a local news supporter. I subscribe to Low HUD and the Recorder in Bedford. Support your local news. I don't get the opportunity to read things cover to cover each week, but I can tell you how enriching it is to actually get to read local news and find out what's going on in our community. This is also usually the opportunity where I get to shamelessly share some pictures of my adorable kids. But this week I opted to share a photo of a new segment that we're doing called Truth or Lawler. I wanted to share this and also some of the commentary that I've received online. Most of which I want to kind of put out there, 99% of which has been positive and warm and invigorating. But the 2% is hilarious. I have I appreciate and maybe like hashtag thank you internet for sharing with me that I have a fat face, that I really should have gotten braces when I was younger. Unfortunately, my family did not have the financial wherewithal, and that I am somehow a right-wing activist, which clearly means you didn't watch the video. So please, please just watch the video and pass it along. And just a friendly reminder for everyone: be kind. It is wonderful and to kind of be out there and actually talking about these issues, talking about what's at stake. There's nothing that's gonna stop that for me, and I know for our guest today. The purpose of these conversations that we are now having on a weekly basis is to engage New Yorkers living in northern Westchester, Rockland County, Putnam County, and southern Dutchess County in the political process, equipping our community with information about the issues impacting our families, our households, and our businesses to help us identify the best person to represent our interests in 2026. We do this by discussing the issues, fostering community, and introducing all of you to the candidates. And I have a real privileged position to do that, and it's been my pleasure. As we work through and up to this people's primary next June, we now have 8 candidates in the race. Not these 8. Jeremy hasn't declared, but he swears he is very seriously considering it, and we're going to talk to him, and that'll be the first question we talk to him about next Thursday. We do have a new candidate in the race who I may or may not get to talk to later this fall. I also wanted to take a moment to speak very briefly to a new ad campaign, a significant ad buy that Congressman Lawler released starting, I believe, last Monday, where he is owning and spinning the one big beautiful bill in ways that just don't even aren't even anchored in truth anymore, aren't even anchored in his previous statements. And I'm going to talk about this a lot in the coming weeks, and so please look for additional posts, because I think that democracy is best served by being grounded in arguments based on fact. But I wanted to call one ad out in particular, which really caught my eye. After speaking on Joe Scarborough about how Medicaid cuts were just a talking point for hospitals and industry, to which Joe asked, so you know better than them how this is going to affect their bottom lines, which was a fair question. He came out with this ad where he noted that there are about 3 million fraudsters on Medicaid that are costing New York around $20 billion. Now, I just wanted to pause on this statistic, which he put out in his expensive, glossy ad, where he speaks with authority to what this bill is going to do, because he's very good at that. He's a prior communications consultant. 3 million fraudsters in Medicaid. New York State Medicaid and CHIP covers around 6.5 million people as of April 2025, 4.1 million adults, 2.5 million children. I'll also remind you, if you're on Medicaid, you're not getting a check from the government. What you are getting is access to a doctor when you're sick. These are low-income individuals who wouldn't otherwise have access to that type of coverage. So my question for Mr. Lawler is, which half of New Yorkers on Medicaid or CHIP does he believe are fraudsters? I asked this question online last night, and there are hundreds of people that agree with wanting an answer to that question. And so my invitation to Mr. Lawler remains. I sent it out to him 3 months ago and again 2 months ago in his communications team. He is welcome to come on and actually talk about his positions and the facts. So far, after acknowledgement of receipt, no response. I'll keep asking. Help me. My challenge is to you, as every week, get involved, find your candidates, know your stuff, and stay positive. New York 17, it's a wide, expansive district. We have so much in common across this district, and I want to make sure that all of our issues are raised and our candidates are addressing them. And the best way to do that is to get involved now. Each week, each live stream, I'm going to be building on this list. I swear I'm doing this just before kids wake up in the morning, so bear with me, and I will post this all online. These are our Northern Westchester Town Democratic Committees and their chairs, or the email addresses the chairs have recommended folks reach out to. This week I'm adding the cities and the villages. I will note there are some vacancies. Briarcliff Manor stood out for me, Mr. Chatsky, so get on that. Putnam County towns, and then next week I'll be adding Rockland and Dutchess. If you do not know where to go, you can always come to the Bedford Democratic Committee, where I am every month, and I'd love to see you and introduce you to the rest of our committee members and our chair, Michael Menard, or point you to another local committee. Email me at kevinfornewyork@gmail.com. Find your candidate. We have amazingly talented candidates, including John, who we'll meet in a moment. Know your stuff. Stay grounded in the facts. It's easy to get caught up in emotional arguments, but if we really stick to facts and data, I think it can only help our cause. And stay positive, especially among our candidates. I've had the pleasure of meeting each one. They're all wonderful people who are giving up a great deal in order to put themselves forward as our next representative. And with that, I'd love to introduce John Sullivan. John is a former FBI intelligence analyst and section chief with nearly 17 years of experience working to combat security threats at home and abroad. He was raised in a working class family. John was the first in his family to earn a 4-year degree. In the FBI, John worked his way into leadership positions, serving presidents of both parties and taking on foreign adversaries and terrorists in the Middle East, including drug cartels, human traffickers at our southern border, and investigating January 6th insurrectionists. John left the FBI in April 2025 as one of the most senior gay officials in the Bureau. He is, again, a father, a husband, and a resident of Rockland County, and I couldn't be happier to have him back.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Really glad to be back with you.
Yeah, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. I've been going all over the district and talking with folks and, continuing to build on the momentum in the campaign. So it's been a really, really great summer.
Yeah, so last week we met like month and a half
Been
ago,
a
8 weeks.
while.
I don't. It's just like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Like how give me some statistics. Like how has it been? How's the journey been? Because I know that you've been everywhere. How many meetings? Like, what's been going on?
Yeah, well, dozens of meetings, right?
Hmm.
Having the opportunity to even see you at the Bedford committee meeting, meeting with all the different committees across the
Hmm.
district, and really getting more involved in the local groups as well, and a lot of the activist groups from Indivisible to CoHope and all these other groups that are so worried about what's happening under Mike Lawler's sort of lack of concern for everyone in the district. And so talking with them, not just about my background and experience, but also about the vision moving forward. I mean, I've been on the picket line with SEIU at Rockland Pulmonary fighting for benefits and fair wages, to working with going to the ACLU bus tour earlier this week, and joining others with Moms Demand Action to deliver a petition and a request for Mike Lawler to denounce HR 38, I believe it
Hmm.
is, which is the transparency, um, not transparency, the reciprocity ruling that's moving through Congress for concealed carry. That
Mm.
would actually really weaken New York's gun security and safety laws, because we
Hmm.
would have to, in reciprocity, accept it from other states that don't have nearly as stringent requirements. To just earlier in the week, sitting down with providers at Sunshine Home Care, talking about healthcare and talking about Medicaid and the cuts and how it's going to really devastate not
Yeah.
just businesses and companies, but real people who
Hmm.
depend on that care. So getting to hear from folks and learn about what's really the key concerns for them. And continuing on, we were talking a little bit before, there's really no such thing as a weekend when you're running for Congress. So
No.
on and forward to events this weekend, leaving right after this talk to join others at the African American Festival here in Nyack, and meeting
Yeah.
with folks tomorrow night.
So I had to ask the question. Like, if you weren't running running for
Yeah.
Congress, what would today otherwise look like?
A lot of playing with Legos, a lot of let's go throw the frisbee, a lot
Yeah.
of probably doing things that I now end up doing late in the evening, like grocery shopping and
Yep.
regular chores.
Yeah.
But I think that it's hard to imagine that parallel universe in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
because I know we're going to talk about the rule of law, but having been in the FBI for so long, that's sort of the foundation that I understand and recognize sort of the patterns of daily life.
Yeah.
And obviously, under this current administration, I don't think those patterns would have existed even if I weren't running, just because of the attack that we're seeing on our federal law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. And I think last time we spoke about your journey to decide to run,
Yeah,
and protecting the rule of law was fundamental to that
yeah,
decision. And I know that as you've been going across the district, this has been a kind of consistent concern, and it probably takes different shapes as you're hearing it from folks.
yeah.
Could you talk to me about like what you see as the real threats to our systems of law?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad that we're in this point, right?
Hmm.
Where we have to think about how our administration is actually doing things to harm us and doing things to avoid the rule of law. For me, I think that if you look at just what's been happening under the administration in these last 6 months, you can highlight so many different things, whether it's, impounding congressionally appropriated funds, whether it's firing 17 different inspectors general from across the government, whether it's dissolving agencies like USAID, which is personal to me because that's where my husband worked, um, and installing January Sixers into our Justice Department, who actually stormed the Capitol that day and were arrested and were going through, trial, and then getting jobs inside the Justice Department. And then, of course, it all started on the 20th of January, that evening when he pardoned all of the insurrectionists who took part in January 6th, something that I and teams who worked with me spent a lot of time and effort making sure that we were following the facts and bringing
Hmm.
them to justice. And so I think that as you look across what's happening, it's really concerning. But the question is kind of, why is this happening? Why is
Hmm.
he doing this? And, you know, part of the vision that I've been bringing to the campaign is not just, it's not enough to run against Mike Lawler and Donald Trump. We have to be
Hmm.
bringing in ideas of what we're pushing for. And, I'm focusing on affordability, safety, and accountability.
Hmm.
And I think Donald Trump and Mike Lawler, who's sitting by complicit while all those things are happening, he's not getting involved on cutting
Affordability,
back.
safety, and accountability.
Accountability,
Hmm.
yeah. And there's sub bullet points to those. We have them on
Hmm.
the website under
Hmm.
the initiatives that we're looking at. But when you look at Donald Trump's actions and the fact that Congress is being completely complicit and Mike Lawler is being silent, it's all to avoid accountability. Whether it's, to your point earlier on, ripping folks off of their healthcare coverage, going after kids and workers in our community, whether it's, stealing money and buying planes from other countries, or, you know, doing everything possible just to undermine how our government functions, because accountability is so key in the fabric of the American constitutional republic system that we have. And the fact that Donald Trump is doing everything possible now to muddy the waters when it comes to accountability and have free reign. I mean, even going after law firms, right? We're
Yes.
seeing that constantly. And we're not seeing from our representative here in New York 17 that he is speaking out against or in any way disagrees with it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's isn't that the role of Congress to serve as the check to excessive executive authority?
Basic, simple civics, right? Three branches, co-equal.
We,
Mike
I think
Lawler
maybe we
must
should
have
have a national
skipped that day.
mandate to go like school, like
Yeah, you don't need a new congressperson training to learn your way around the Capitol. Maybe you need to learn
Schoolhouse
about the
Rock.
branches of government. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. How it's oversees law. I think Mike Lawler must have missed that day in simple
Yeah.
civics, because it seems that he doesn't understand that his role is to be a check, but not just a check,
Hmm.
a our representative,
Yes,
our
for
voice.
our issues.
And he's not bringing those to the forefront. To your point early on, he's putting out ads talking about how he did things that he didn't do, or how he did things that are the opposite of what he actually did when it comes to cutting Medicaid funding.
Hmm.
So it's just twisting this narrative. Kellyanne Conway said there are alternative facts, and from that point forward, I feel like Mike Lawler has really embraced that idea and wants to
Yeah.
create his own facts.
Yes.
But that's not how the world works.
No, it isn't. And actually, just a side note is, I have a side question. How did it feel when the president pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists? When you did your job,
Yeah.
the FBI did
Um,
its job.
Yeah, I mean, there were thousands of people who worked on those cases,
Hmm.
of, I'm sure, every political background and
Hmm.
stripe. You don't have a lot of gay Democrats who are senior executives in the FBI. So I think that when you look at sort of what happened on that evening when he went into the Oval Office and signed that, it's nothing short of a gut punch,
Hmm.
right? To like literally feel physically like your stomach turn, because you know what this is going to mean. Um, there were people who came into my office crying the days after, saying, "What am I going to do? Because I worked on these investigations, I did my job, and now the current administration is saying that that was wrong. Am I going to get fired?" I have one woman who's a single mom. She's
Hmm.
like, "I can't lose my job. What happens if I do things under this administration and the next administration we see that pendulum swing back? Am I going to
Yeah.
be held?" So I had folks, one person, her husband was at the Capitol providing security, a senior police officer who was attacked and almost killed by somebody on January 6th. That person was pardoned because it was a blanket pardon, even though that individual was charged with crimes much more than trespassing or interfering with Congress, and got many, many years in prison for attempting to kill a police officer. Well, that night, after being pardoned, he called their home and said, "I'm coming back to finish the job," and lives in their town. So, yes, having worked on it, having worked with so many teams on it, it was a gut punch, but it has real implications for people's
Hmm.
safety and security. I mean, that woman that I was talking about who worked for me and her husband was there, she used to be a police officer. She now had to carry her weapon when walking her dog because she didn't know if the guy would pop out of a bush somewhere. And that was real. That's a
Yeah.
real threat. And it's
Yeah.
just something that we shouldn't be seeing in America. And Donald Trump being in the White House and having a security detail and being completely separated from the folks he's hurting just doesn't think about those things. And there are no guardrails. And our members of Congress should be doing everything possible to make sure those kinds of actions are not being allowed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I've been thinking a fair amount about this, just knowing that we were going to have the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of thought in theory that there'd be a Rubicon, like a real
Mm.
line, a clear line. But for some reason, I keep coming back to this kind of image and story of a house being at the edge of the ocean, and it's like if this water gets that
Mhm.
high, it's I'm gonna leave at that point.
Right.
But it comes up on one side and it comes up on another, and it takes a little bit more of the beach away, and eventually the water is already past you.
Right.
And I feel like that is kind of what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from you. It's there is no kind of one line, and a lot of those lines are kind of small and crossed and about regular order that are deteriorating.
Right.
Is that right? And is that how you see it and feel?
I think that's a great analogy. In a lot of ways with Donald Trump, chaos is the point.
Hmm.
And it makes it so it's hard for us to focus on each of the individual actions that occur. And for many Americans, each of one of those individual actions may not impact them directly. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of more of the same. But to your point, as you're seeing it come at all sides as that
Hmm.
water is rising. It is the slow erosion of the key
Hmm.
foundational bedrock of this country. I
Hmm.
mean, when you have January Sixers now inside of the Department of Justice, or you have the Department of Justice removing key units like the public integrity section, which deals with, corrupt public officials. You have the Justice Department being told by Donald Trump to dismiss charges against folks like, the mayor of New York. It starts to create precedent, right? And you look
Hmm.
at the Supreme Court and how there's a lot of focus on precedent. It's starting to create these precedents now that it's going to be very hard to come back from, because as you start to lose civil servants in the
Yeah.
government, key folks like myself who dedicated years of their lives there, there's a report out from somebody in the administration. It may have been OMB saying they're anticipating, or GSA is saying, that there's going to be 300,000 civil servants removed from the government by the end of this year. That's a large number of people
Hmm.
and experience, and we just
Yes.
saw with Tulsi Gabbard revoking clearances this week for
Hmm.
some of the key folks who work are the true expert, like the singular expert on certain issues. And so as you start to have this happen where it's retribution
Hmm.
and complicity from our Congress members,
Hmm.
there is going to be it's going to be very hard for folks when that water hits that line.
Yeah.
It may come out of nowhere for a lot of
Yeah.
people because they won't have realized. And I think we're seeing some of that on the streets of DC now.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Supreme Court. One question I hear, or kind of and it might be a coping mechanism, is like,
Mhm, mhm.
we have the court. The courts will handle it. Will the
Yeah.
courts handle it? Are the courts handling it?
Uh, So in a lot of ways, I think the courts are handling it, especially the lower circuit courts. They are
Mm.
holding Donald Trump accountable. They're putting pauses on certain policies being implemented or changes. But I think there was an article in The Atlantic recently, actually, and it came out and said that Donald Trump in this term has ignored 1 in 3 court rulings. There is no fourth branch of government.
Yeah.
We are founded on this idea that you will follow the law. And Donald Trump has appointed himself, I think he called himself this week, the chief law enforcement officer of the government of the
That's
country.
not chilling. I mean,
Right. And
seriously. Yeah.
then he feels like that empowers him to ignore the court. There is no then next step. It's Congress in a lot of ways
Hmm.
to stop these things and say, okay, the court has identified this to be illegal or unconstitutional. We now need to legislate to ensure that this is actually codified in law. But Donald Trump's ignoring it, and Mike Lawler's not speaking out. I mean, everything from tariffs to, we could go into so many different issues where he is not operating under the law. Many of these executive orders are being found to be illegal, but he's ignoring a lot of what the courts are doing. And so that's why I think bringing the perspective that I have, having been in law
Hmm.
enforcement as well as national security, is important because I understand how things are supposed to work. I know how they work inside.
Yeah.
And I've also worked for presidents of both parties, and
Hmm.
even Donald Trump 1.0.
Hmm.
And even as I talk to folks around the district, they're kind of like, even those who voted for Trump say, oh, I wanted 1.0, not this.
Hmm.
And I think that's where he's losing a lot of support, and that's where I think Mike Lawler is also losing a lot of support when he puts up these ads that are selling lies, because the courts the courts should not be our only fail safe
Hmm.
in this country, and it really needs to be Congress. And he's ignoring them because they are happily laying down their arms and not using the power that they are given.
How can like it again? It's so easy for all of us, and I think it's just a coping mechanism for all of us to just kind of
Yeah,
keep our heads down on a day-to-day basis.
yeah.
Like, how would will this and how will this actually affect our households, our families in the district, if we
Yeah.
haven't already seen it?
Well, look, I think what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. right now, having friends there and talking to them about, what it's like to have the National Guard and all these other states who are sending law enforcement officers, and then having them masked and having many of the National Guard being armed, as the Secretary of Defense just said this week needs to happen. That doesn't make you safer. It doesn't make you feel safe. I've been overseas in Africa and places
Hmm.
and spent time in countries where they are under true authoritarian rule, where there are folks with long guns on the streets. You feel surveilled. You don't feel
Hmm.
protected. And so Donald Trump has said New York is New York City. He wants to look at doing the same thing. I think there's legal. Can that really happen? DC has a unique sort of situation, but New York, Chicago, other places, that's going to impact folks who are traveling into the city for
Hmm.
work, or are trying to, yeah, and
Hmm.
trying to use services in the city. I mean, it will impact our economy. It's
Hmm.
going to We're already seeing massive drops in things in the DC economic sector as a result of folks feeling fearful about leaving their homes or being out
Hmm.
on the street because they look a certain way and there are checkpoints. I have a friend who went through 2 checkpoints just this last week driving a mile and a half in DC, car checkpoints.
Hmm.
This is what he wants to bring to New York. And we're not hearing anything about it from Mike Lawler. But it impacts your daily life, your
Yeah.
ability to actually provide for your family. And then, when it comes to many of these other things, including tariffs,
Hmm.
or impounding government funds, I mean, we're already seeing key sectors. I think CNN said something like apparel is up by over 9%, apparel and shoes, as a direct result, looking pre-tariff and post.
Hmm.
These things are now being passed on. These taxes are being passed on to working folks. And,
Yeah.
you know, when you're trying to make sure that you can make ends meet, pay your rent, pay your mortgage, feed your
Hmm.
kids, and then on top of that, you have the big ugly bill getting passed,
Yeah.
which is going to rip away your health care or increase the cost of healthcare if you're buying it off the exchange.
Hmm.
Michael Lawler voted for it 3 times, and it's going to
Hmm.
boost the energy costs by up to maybe $500 a year.
Hmm.
So all of this stuff slowly and surely is going to impact folks.
Yeah.
I'm just worried that right now, because of the chaos, a lot of that is getting lost in the conversation because unfortunately the media, and I'm glad what you said about local media at the beginning. It's part of
Hmm.
why my campaign launched specifically in Low HUD.
Hmm.
It gives you the direct impacts on our community, but the larger media is kind of just following this shiny object, and it's
Hmm.
really obfuscating what's happening.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, like I'm seeing, like you mentioned, the tariff costs. Our grocery bills are going
Yeah.
up. I
Yeah.
mean, first of all, like with kids, I never knew how expensive berries were,
Oh
but
yeah. Yeah.
or,
My
or
6-year-old never gets full. It's like, what's for first dinner, second dinner, and third dinner, you know?
but every week we're buying like the same stuff, but
Yeah.
like the costs are creeping up, and then you see occasionally like a jump, and it doesn't recede, and I think people are going to increasingly realize that.
Yeah, yeah, and, that's where folks feel it the most. They're
Hmm.
feeling it in the day-to-day costs, but
Hmm.
we have to think about the folks who are going to feel it when it comes to healthcare. Under affordability, there's a lot of things under the areas and issues that I care about, but I think healthcare is one of those ones that
Hmm.
it's hardest for people to be so tangible about, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I was at Sunshine Home Care this week, talking with folks who really rely on the care of these caregivers in their home for their kids.
Hmm.
Pediatric care reimbursement rates under Medicaid are already lower than they need to be. And with
Mhm.
additional cuts, you're going to have kids who are, have serious health challenges who need that care, and parents who have to work or, can't provide that care in a way that a trained professional can. And
Fraudsters, John.
yeah, I mean, I would love to know when you get that answer, because I
Yeah,
think I tried to look on the slide. It looked like it was so tiny, his sourcing for that.
yeah,
I think it's probably Mike Lawler's mind, but
yeah.
it's just one of those things where these are folks who vote.
Mhm.
These are folks who understand. And that's why, it's important to call out those crazy ads from
Yep.
salt to Medicaid, because they're lies. It is
Mhm.
truly a lie. And, they were smart in how the big ugly bill is going to be harming our communities. A lot of these cuts will be coming after the
Mhm.
midterm elections,
Mhm.
but we have to be out there and talking about it now. That's why I
Yeah.
was there to learn, right? I'm not
Yep.
saying I have every answer, but I am there to listen and learn,
Yeah.
because I think the Democratic Party hasn't done enough of that in the past.
Yeah. And as Joe Scarborough said to Mike Lawler,
Right.
like you don't really you have to understand how industry works to understand how they're going to respond to this.
Right.
And while they think, well, our politicians, including Mr. Lawler, may have felt they kind of dodged the bullet by moving this date later, if you're a business, if you're a hospital,
Right.
you are going to start making cuts sooner. If you're a Medicaid agency, you have to let people know sooner. And I very much hope that that happens and people can understand the implications of that vote.
Well, and rural hospitals, the Veterans Administration is
Hmm.
under attack.
Hmm.
But look at Garnett, right? It's outside of the
Hmm.
district, but they've already lowered their trauma level and they've started laying off staff in
Hmm.
anticipation of these
Yes.
cuts.
Yes.
And then for all of us who happen to have healthcare and are lucky enough to have it, premiums are going to go up because they
Hmm.
have to recoup the cost of treating
Hmm.
folks without care.
Hmm.
And we're going to see our emergency rooms and other facilities just overrun because truly we don't have enough beds per 100,000 individuals in our many of the counties. I mean, it's in the 100s, 200s of beds per
Yes.
100,000 people. And that's not enough as it is. And then when you start making the system harder to access and harder to get the funds to replenish supplies, it's going to be passed on to the rest of the community because we have to treat those who are sick.
From protecting the rule of law to healthcare to addressing and checking the authority on tariffs, what would you do differently if you were in Congress?
Yeah. Well, I would be speaking out constantly. And I think that part of being a member of Congress is being present in your district as well, to make sure that you are kind of doing that test with your constituents, that you're actually caring about the issues and talking about the issues. I've heard about these specific issues that you just mentioned consistently throughout this campaign. So I would be on every television show, podcast, every place possible to call out what is happening. I would also be, even though the Democrats are currently in the minority, I would hope that we would be in the majority when we win. And we will have the opportunity then to introduce legislation to check and stop a lot of these things. But I think that when it comes down to, what we can really do in Congress, and when we win in 2026 and when I'm seated in 2027, it's going to come down to oversight. It's going to come down to holding them accountable, because he's still going to be in the White House. He's not going to sign a law that is going to undermine his agenda. But oversight is going to be key. And it's going to be skipping that new member of Congress orientation, getting lost, and getting to that hearing room and rolling up my sleeves and doing the investigations and intelligence gathering and information gathering that I've done my entire career. I have built investigations by doing that methodic work, and I will do the same thing in Congress and the oversight committee, and conducting oversight, because we don't have time in this next Congress to learn the job. We have to be doing that day one, take the oath and walk in and gavel in. And I think that the other piece of this is also making sure that we are introducing laws or bills, even if they don't get signed into law. The Democratic Party should be doing this now,
Hmm.
introducing legislation that would benefit Americans. We need to give the country an alternative path and say, we've been doing this, we've been pushing for this, we've been, whether it be lowering the cost of care, clawing back the cuts on the big ugly bill. They should be introducing those things now to give America almost a project 2027 for what we'll be doing when we get into Congress. And so it's making, it's kind of chewing gum and walking at the same time, right? Staying engaged
Yeah.
with your constituency every weekend, being back, having meetings, not just a couple town halls that are
Hmm.
highly, structured. It's being available all
Mhm.
the time. And it is then also going to Congress and conducting that oversight during the week and making sure that you're holding the administration accountable, not just for what they want to do, but for what they're doing now. And, Mike Lawler has gone after a lot of us for a lot of reasons, but he
Mhm.
hasn't figured out what sticks with me yet, because he went after Mondaire Jones in particular and Sean Patrick Maloney for
Mhm.
being soft on crime. I've actually caught criminals. This guy just talks about crime. I've actually
Mhm.
worked the southern border. He just
Mhm.
rails about it.
Yeah.
So we can go into the bio and background and why I'm uniquely positioned for this. But I think that when it comes down to it, you need to be the opposite of Mike Lawler. Tell people
Mhm.
the truth, be available, and stand up for Americans and folks in New York 17.
Well said. And like, do you have like a first bill that you're thinking that if you were first day, like
Yeah.
what would you want to put forward or co-sponsor?
Under accountability, I went into the FBI as a kid with college debt and student loans and walked out as somebody who had recently just paid off his college debt and student loans. I didn't walk out a millionaire. And you know what?
Yeah.
Congress members should not be going to Congress under those same circumstances and walking out millionaires.
Mhm.
So I would be co sponsoring or introducing getting stock trading out of Congress. And you should not go to Congress and get rich. But it's definitely not my only priority, right? I
Mhm.
think that is something we can do to clean up politics in a lot of ways. But we have to be focusing on bringing back programs that were cut under the big ugly
Mhm.
bill. We need to be focusing on how we can make healthcare more accessible and affordable. And so there's so many different issues, but I've been really lucky and proud to work and stand with Mom's Demand, right? Doing what we can to get assault weapons off our streets, and finding a way to bring back the assault weapons ban.
Mhm.
There's no need. I've shot those weapons. There's no need to have weapons of war on our streets. But I also investigated, when in my time in the FBI, some of the switches that you can print on a 3D printer or order online that make your Glock go from a regular Glock, regular handgun,
Mhm.
to a fully automatic weapon.
Mhm.
And those things cost pennies, and it's ghost guns and it's 3D printed guns. And so working to introduce, any sort of build that can build on what we saw come out of the Biden administration.
Mhm.
And it's going to be increasing red flags or universal background checks, which, by the way, are popular with almost everyone. It's like
Mhm.
an 80% approval rating across parties. And so I think bringing some of that common sense to the floor as well.
Yeah, and so as we have a terrific field of candidates, and you bring such fluency in so many issues about both domestic and international policy. What do you see as do you see that as one of your differentiating characteristics? Are there others? Why should district members who are watching right now consider supporting you and
Yeah.
getting involved?
No, thanks. We do have a great group of candidates, and many of whom I've gotten to spend time with outside of forums and
Yeah.
things. And we actually do like each other. But I think right now, back to the point that I was saying, of we don't have time to learn on the job.
Hmm.
I think it's bringing that experience, not just in national security, but in law enforcement.
Hmm.
It's having that on the ground experience both overseas in Israel for 3 years, working against Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranian influence, being in the tunnels of Gaza, having the Iron Dome intercept over my head, going after ISIS in places like Mali and Mauritania and Burkina
Hmm.
Faso and Africa. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and get the job done. And it's bringing that experience and the willingness to fight back. I mean, look, I left the FBI because I was so concerned about the course our country was embarking under Donald Trump, and seeing
Hmm.
what Mike Lawler was doing, being completely complicit, is part of why I'm running. If he was standing up and fighting back against Donald Trump on all of these things, I don't think you'd see as crowded of a field.
Hmm.
And I think that we would be doing things to support those who are willing to fight back. But we're not having that now. And, we're going to need to fight. And I think when it comes down to it, it's having real life lived experience running teams and groups who have gone after those who are trying to harm this country. And now it is our current government. It's our current administration and Congress by being quiet. It's personal to me. It's what I dedicated my life to. In a different realm and in a different universe, I'd still be in the FBI and still be doing that work. But from my husband losing his job,
Hmm.
and where it was ensuring bad guys didn't get our goods and services because they were terrorists, to doing everything I did, from working on counterterrorism to January 6th to criminal actions. I'm in this race because we need to actually be willing to fight back. We need to bring experience to that fight, and we need to hit the ground on day one and do the work that I've done my entire career, which is going to be that oversight and
Mhm.
introducing bills that make common sense and make life more affordable for everyone.
I'm so glad you're in it, and we need a new representative for our district. This district is also going to be pivotal for our national control of
Yeah.
Congress, and it's going to draw national attention.
Yeah.
How do you see, like, what is your pathway for not only generating local support, but national support for your candidacy?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's the DCCC that has said the majority runs through New York 17. It's going
Mhm.
to be a key pivotal battleground. We have the ability to win it though. And I think that in a lot of ways, it's getting our message out. It's sharing our background, our experience, our bio, our willing to bring that fight to Congress, but also being clear eyed and understanding that we need to listen to the constituents. We need to hear what concerns them. And so that's why I've been traveling from every corner. I mean, between miles on the car, tolls paid, we have been everywhere. I am, a lot of us are subsidizing Easy Pass in such a way, but it's important to actually sit down face to face with folks.
Mhm.
And so that's why I've said there's no living room too small, no coffee shop too small, too tiny, like let's sit down and have those conversations. And so that's what I've been doing. That's been the focus of the campaign. I've had the opportunity, to be on Brian Tyler Cohen's show, to be on Call to Activism and talking
Mhm.
about this district. I've been on Sirius XM during an evening drive home,
Yep.
talking about the issues. And so, and then doing some print, right, including
Mhm.
Jewish Insider, talking about background and experience. So those are key ways in which you get your message out nationally as well as locally.
Mhm.
But, in a lot of ways, the national attention will come because it's so pivotal. And it will be a balancing act because I think you need to recognize that the people who vote for you are in New York 17. National helps with fundraising and other things.
Yeah. So people are now starting to pay attention and getting engaged, and I
Right.
only expect that that's going to continue come the fall. If they have a couple of friends, neighbors to get together, and they want to get in touch with you,
Yep.
John Sullivan, Democrat for Congress, how do they do that?
Email me directly, john@johnsullivan4ny.com. Would love to come and talk with you. Love to meet with folks and just share more of my background and experience and, the vision that we want to bring to New York 17. And, would love to have folks join up and sign up on the website to help the campaign. It's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a coalition. And I'm so glad to be standing with folks at places like Mount Kisco and others when we are protesting what's happening in this country and just want to keep that energy going and have folks join the campaign.
John, thank you for coming on again.
No, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. And thank you for taking time out of your vacation.
Yeah, of course, of course. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So everybody, that was John Sullivan for Congress. If you liked what you heard, John at johnsullivanforny.com. Shoot him an email. Bring some neighbors together. Get to hear him directly. Get to have your own podcast in your own living room to ask him questions. This is what it's about. If we are going to really win this seat back, now is the time to start getting engaged and really finding a representative that reflects your values, your issues, and is willing to speak to them in Congress. And there are others. We've had the opportunity so far of talking with Peter, Kate, Beth, Mike, Effie, and we spoke with John today. Jeremy will be coming up later this week on Thursday. We'll take a break for Labor Day, and then we'll be back to close out the second and possibly final round of interviews with Jessica Reinman on Saturday, September 6th at 10 a.m. Again, if you have heard a candidate or candidates that you like, show them a sign of support. Reach out to them, get involved with their campaigns, and make a donation, a starting donation of $20.26. This is not a telethon. I am not getting any of this money. I am only paying money for this live stream. And this is a public personal service for me that allows me to sleep at night. But I would encourage you to get involved in each of their campaigns. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join us on a Saturday morning. It's not quite cartoons, but hopefully it's just as satisfying. Thank you for allowing me to represent you in these conversations with our candidates, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Talk soon.